Ahoy, Peter here from Bryter Training, and today I am bringing you some tips for people who are starting or returning to online learning or university or self-paced study. I mentor many university students at the master's level, and I tend to have the same conversations when we start out. So I've created this video to help some of you who don't have mentors and also just to save me some time in the future. It's basically a list of topics that I wish someone had explained to me when I started studying. Now, quick disclaimer, I'm not associated with any particular university. I am speaking as a student and as a trainer. So these are just my experiences, my opinions, and you're free to take it or leave it. So who is this video for? My target audience is for three main types of people. So either those undertaking self-paced learning, those returning to study after a significant amount of time, or those who have just hit a wall and lost all motivation. Online learning can be a little bit different to attending live sessions on campus, and with access to so many online options, there's more and more people returning to study after several years or even decades, so it can be a little bit overwhelming. So I wanted to put together some things that you can consider to build your confidence and to get you back into the swing to set you up for success. Some online universities drip feed the content and attempt to run it like a physical campus, but they do it online. So these tips that I'm going to go through can still help you. However, if the content for you is unlocked each week and your assignments have set deadlines, then you'll probably just need to approach some of the reading and the planning a bit differently. While this video is more for self-paced courses, many of the tips are useful for anyone taking up online study, even some live or on-campus study as well. And as always, there are timestamps with chapters in the description, so you're welcome to skip to the parts that are relevant to you or use these to refresh your memory in the future. So I'm going to start out with some standard basics, and the first one are the uncomfortable facts. So first of all, if you want the degree, you need to do the assessments. So you're doing a degree, that means 12 subjects or however many make up your course. And each subject has a series of assessments which you need to do. So some of them will go well, some of them may be disastrous, in which case you simply resubmit or you learn from it and you move on. Either way, the world doesn't end. And some of them are going to be fun and inspiring, and some of them will suck. So no matter what, they all need to be done. One step at a time, one word at a time. Fear of failure, lack of motivation, a busy schedule, having kids or pets or pandemics, doesn't matter. So to get the degree done in time, you need to keep moving forward. Next, understand your goal and the level of your degree. So there's a basic difference between a bachelor and a master's, or a pass versus distinction. So whereas a bachelor is more go and find the information on this topic or find these answers to questions, a master's degree is more how would you interpret or apply this content. And personally I like that, since it means you can come up with your own ideas and opinions. But many people go looking for templates or references for existing ideas. Now, to help you understand this more, I recommend looking up a model called Bloom's Taxonomy, which is basically a framework for categorizing educational goals. So at high school or even some bachelor's degrees, it's often focusing on remembering or understanding, so being able to explain ideas and concepts. Then you go into a master's degree and it's more about applying and analysing, so you're drawing connections or you're using information in new situations. Then you get to the PhD level, which is creating new or original work. So this is a really useful model because it helps you to define what you need to do. And a good rule of thumb is the higher the grade you want, or the more advanced the qualification that you're doing, then the higher up this framework you want to go. Finally, learn the basics of academic writing. So nothing major, but understand APA 7 or Harvard or whatever style your course uses. Sites like Scriber have all the essentials you need and in nice plain English. So APA 7, for example, has got very specific guidelines on headings, formatting, page numbers, running headers. So formatting is easy points. And many assessors who need to review 100 similar assignments will just skim through and they're going to look for key elements. So if they're present, they'll tend to assume that you know what you're doing, and it can also help with then how they mark your work. Also, learn the difference in the types of assessments. Technical reports, business reports, essays, they all have different formats and different structures, and different universities will also have different preferences, so get up to speed on what is required. And finally, I'll go through this a little bit later on, but learn how to use EndNote or some type of reference managing software as well, but we'll have a look at that in a sec. Okay, so next section, we're going to talk about time. So you need to do the assignments and the excuses are irrelevant. So how are you going to fit in that commitment into your lifestyle or approach it in a way that suits your learning style? So degrees don't do themselves. So set deadlines and dedicate time. It doesn't matter if it's 1 hour a night or maybe you prefer to work in 8-hour blocks. Some people commit to say 200 words per day. So in a week, there's 1,400 words done. So if it's important, you'll fit it in, but find a system or a style that works for you. Next, decide on your target. So do you need to graduate with distinction? The vast majority of people have never been asked for their specific results. All that matters is the qualification that you have. So unless you're continuing on to do your PhD, remember, P's get degrees. So on that, don't develop an ulcer over a lower score than you expected. Some universities consider a pass to be, you've demonstrated what we wanted. So it's a good grade. Now others grade on a curve, and yes, this is ridiculous for online since there's no single class and assessment really should be objective and against a rubric. But my point is, sometimes you may get a lower grade. If it's a pass, learn from the feedback and then just keep refining it. And remember, a pass means that you have a grasp of the content and you've demonstrated it. So take it, move on. So why is this important? Because some people invest an extra 2 or 3 weeks and a heap of stress and energy second guessing and refining an assignment to get, an extra 5 or 10% when you could have just submitted it and you could be halfway through the next one. So only you can decide if it's worth it. We all want the best mark for our efforts, but you really need to pick your battles when it comes to grades and decide whether your time and mental health is better served chasing an extra grade or whether it's better moving on to the next assignment or having a beer with your mates or having a degree of a life while you get through your studies. So next, a big complaint or concern that comes up is there's just so much content. How do I read and watch everything? So online degrees often have about 200 to 300 hours worth of reading and videos to review for each subject. And the fact is, if you go through all of that, by the time you get to the end of reading everything, you will have forgotten most of the stuff from the start. And the simple fact is, people don't learn and retain by reading and watching. So without going off on a tangent, genuine learning requires your brain to change. And it comes down to repetition over time. So anyone that tells you that they learn by just reading and writing mindlessly is pretty much delusional. The best most people can hope for is memorization long enough to write that assignment or pass the test. For the best results, you want to balance what you need to do to pass and what you want to take away in terms of learning. So ideally those two things align, but in reality they often don't. So identify the critical models and the concepts and focus on applying them. Most of the rest of the content is just there for context. So don't read or watch everything, you'll be there forever. At a physical uni, the days with the most attendance are the first and the last. And the first is because that's where you find out what the learning objectives are and what the expectations are. And the last day is because it's the summary and the final instruction before your exams. So nobody reads the whole textbook cover to cover, and especially if you're doing advanced studies such as an MBA or another master's degree, then recognize that you bring significant experience to the table. So once you know the assessments, skim through the headings and the content, and if you're familiar with it, just scan the key points. And just focus on the areas that are new or interesting or relevant to the assessments. Now, sometimes it's worth identifying the key concepts or the models and just search for them online or even on Wikipedia for a version of the concept that's written in plain English. So again, some academic sources are so convoluted and use 12 pages to explain a concept that can be described in 4 dot points. So it's about learning how to prioritize the content. Is it relevant? How does it apply to my job or my life, which then helps you with learning? Am I familiar with it already? Or does it make sense? Because if it's common sense, just acknowledge it and move on. Try explaining it to a 6-year-old or explain how it could be used at work, and then move on. And remember, if you already know it, then don't waste your time repeating it. If you work as an accountant and one of your subjects is accounting, then just skim over the concepts, and if you already know them all, jump to the assessment and move on. There is likely zero benefit of deep diving into the material in that case. So when you're deciding on where or what to focus on, you can ask yourself a couple of questions. So, what do you need to know? So whether that's personal or for the assessments. What do you already know? Because if you already know it, don't waste time repeating it. What do you need to do in order to pass? And what do you want to know? And can that be done later? Maybe you can do further reading at a later date. So either skim the content and decide what you already know, or start reading and watching, and if it's interesting, go ahead, but if not, skip it. Read the intro and the summary. They will tell you what's important. So basically you review what you don't know, look up the models and the topics on Google for an easy version or a wiki. Consider copying and pasting the content into a Word document so you can use that as reading time. You can use it for easy application for your assignments, and you end up with a document that's nice and easy for you to search in the future. So in summary for this section, identify, apply, rephrase, and explain the critical models and the content. Then focus on the intro and the summary sections, focus on what you don't know, and search Google and Wikipedia for a plain English version. So next section, just a quick word on copying the content. So if your content is online, take the time to copy it from the online portal to a Word document. So some platforms literally have an export function, which is a godsend. If not, you'll need to highlight, copy, paste. So you'll need to copy and paste each screen. It takes ages, but it's worth it for 2 reasons. First of all, you get familiar with the content and you can read the introductions and the summaries of each module as you go so that you can get a good overview. Secondly, it gives you a single document that you can search for online tests or when you're writing your assignments. You can also include video blurbs and article extracts so that you can search the document and you'll be directed to any external content. Also, save all the PDF documents and reading into a single folder. Then when you need to search for content, whether it's for a test or for an assignment, you can search all of them at once with a single keystroke by pressing Ctrl-Shift-F. We've got another video on how to search multiple PDF files at once, so you can check that one out if you don't know how to do it. So basically, we're looking at creating a production line. So ideally, you want to come up with a system that you can repeat for each subject. And the more you can automate that process, the easier it is to maintain momentum. For me, the sequence was read the assignments and prepare a template based on the rubric, then do the notes and the reading, then do any exams or quizzes, then complete the assignment template, then do my references, tidy it up, submit, and then rinse and repeat. So find a process that works for you. I also tend to work in blocks, so the whole 1 hour a night thing just doesn't work for me. So once I get started, I prefer to do a decent few hours. So I adjusted my schedule accordingly. However, I can share my approach since I ended up with a paint by numbers process that I applied to every unit. It was boring, but it did help me get through the master's degree relatively quickly and with a distinction average. So this is my approach to each subject. First of all, read the assignment so that you have guidance for your reading. Next, copy and paste all the content from your platform into a Word document. This becomes a searchable note for your quizzes, and also it's a useful document just for assignments and for future reference. Now thirdly, while copying and pasting, read the introduction and the conclusion of each module. If there's anything unfamiliar, then I explored that further, or I looked up the concepts on Wikipedia or a plain English site. If I was also familiar with the ideas, then I just moved on, since if you attempt to read and watch all the content, you're going to be there forever, plus you won't retain most of it anyway. So as I copy and pasted, I scanned through the content anyway, so most of the reading gets done within a few days. Now in my degree, there were quizzes that you did, so I then did the quizzes next. In my opinion, they're often not knowledge checks, they're actually just how well you can search on the fly. So I just like to get them out of the way, but that's just a personal preference. So number 5, map out the assignment. So this was a standard template each time, and to be really honest, every assignment from early units onwards was just a report format, regardless of whether it was meant to be an essay, a report, or reflective. Either way, take the task instructions and the rubric points, put them down as headings into a Word document, add a heading for your introduction, your conclusion, your references, pick 3 or 4 concepts from your course reading that you can relate to the assignment, write a short paragraph for each one linking it to the assignment, then just fill in the gaps. So I usually phrased each task instruction and rubric point as a question, and then you can put each of those questions under the appropriate heading to sequence your assignment. Then you just go through and basically answer the questions. So it turns your 4,000 word essay into a series of short answer questions to answer. Then once done, you just rejig the headings, format, and you're done. So you can create a standard template where you just plug the assessment criteria into it, then they become significantly easy and time efficient. I always did references after I wrote the assignment, that's just my preference, but that's it. Rinse and repeat for every unit. Assignment, notes, quiz, report structure, write the report, submit, repeat. So while we're talking about assignments, so I always do recommend start with the assignments. Get familiar with what they're asking for because these are the things that you need to get done in order to pass and get your degree. This is going to guide your reading and make sure that you don't waste time doubling up or going backwards and forwards. And the fact is you can review any of the interesting content in your own time, but while you get sidetracked going down content-based rabbit holes, that isn't what you need to do to pass the degree. So you might even like to take a section of the assignment and write it like you were drafting an email for your manager or a colleague. So chances are if you just had to sit down and slap together an email, you could do it in 15 minutes. But when it's called an assignment, we tend to second guess and overthink and procrastinate. So just write. It's a lot easier to edit something than it is to create it in the first place. And just remember, there are no tricks. So don't second guess. They're not trying to trick you up or trap you. Give them what they ask for. Answer the questions, apply the course material, clearly demonstrate the elements of the rubric and the task instructions. And I mentioned EndNote earlier, so use EndNote or Mendeley or something similar for referencing. Again, we've got a tutorial video for this. It's basically a reference management system so that you can save all your references and PDF files and it automatically creates your reference lists and your in-text citations in your Word document in the format that you need. So whether it's APA 7 or Harvard, etc. So it's a choice, but it saves a huge amount of time and a small investment in time up front will save you hours or days throughout your study. So now let's talk about your assessors. Now it shouldn't be the case, but marking is somewhat subjective. And as we've said, your assessors mark hundreds of the same assignment and 95% of them are basically the same concept and they even use the same examples. Therefore, your chosen topic or perspective can influence your result. And this is where something called scholarly opinion comes into it, which basically means choose a side, create a cool hypothesis, and find pros and cons and arguments for either side. So if the assignment asks you to describe how communication models can be used to resolve a workplace problem, you may want to consider not just answering that question. Instead, we can think about something polarizing or specific. So you might propose that people rely on communication models and frameworks to compensate for a general lack of common sense or emotional intelligence. Or maybe most communication problems are caused by sexism and biases and how these models can address it. Doesn't matter if you believe it, but choosing something extreme makes your assignment interesting and different, and that's where your higher scores are going to come from. The other benefit of a clear scholarly opinion or a hypothesis is that it gives you a clear objective from the start to structure your report or essay around. So whatever the aim of the assignment is, which should be clearly stated in your introduction, include the content that answers it, make sure each part of your assignment is linked back to that objective. Make the format clear, logical, obvious, and so to do that, write for the reader. So assessors often work like recruiters screening resumes. They skim through and they look for key elements that the task description or the rubric asks for. So make sure the headings are clear and aligned with the marking criteria. So keep the language simple. For some reason, people think that academic writing needs to be technical and convoluted. If people have to work too hard to understand what you're saying, especially if the assessor doesn't really know your particular industry or your chosen scenario well, then you increase the chance of them missing the key points. And of course, run your assignment through something like Typely or Grammarly. It helps you look at your writing from a different perspective. It's definitely not always right, so don't just blindly follow it, but it does help with refining what you've written. And while there are some amazing assessors out there, I think there are also some who just skim through for key elements and run your essay through Typely to see if there's any highlighted issues. So it's worth taking 2 minutes out just to address any obvious errors. So keep in mind, the assessor's job is to assess proficiency. They're not mentors, they're not business partners, they're there to tick a box to show that you've met the requirements for the university. So make their life easy and remember that they are not necessarily experienced in the real world, they're academics. So this won't make me popular with some, but the reality is there are some amazing assessors who have great life experience, they know the content, and they take the time to really review and analyse your work, either to provide a fair grade or to help you be better. And then there are some assessors who are pure academics, some who have zero real work experience in the industries or the context that you're writing about, and others who don't even know the content well, and I'll even say if at all. So some just mark from a rubric and based on a whole set of preconceptions and filters. Some even just scan for keywords, run it through a grammar check. So my point is, write for your audience. Make it clear, make it easy to understand, don't use jargon, and structure it in a way that makes it easy as possible to find the accessible components. And if you tend to have the same assessor, then learn from their feedback and write to meet their preferences. It should be objective, but it's not always. Now let's just have a quick chat about understanding scores. So I mentioned earlier that you want to have a clear objective when it comes to your grades. And part of that is having a realistic expectation and an understanding of what those grades even mean. So don't try and compare pass, credit, distinction to the old A, B and C gradings. It's not a case of HD is an A and a pass is a D. A pass is a sound understanding of the core concepts of the topic, and it's all you need to get your degree. So again, consider how much extra time and energy and sanity you want to put into chasing the higher grades. Now, a HD is generally a unique insight with a flawless execution and a different approach which makes it stand out compared to the other 1,000 assignments that have been submitted. So just keep that in mind. Finally, the big question I get is, how do I stay motivated? So a couple of quick points on that. Firstly, all the way back to the beginning, you have a certain number of subjects to pass and each subject has a certain number of assessments. And you do need to do them all to get your degree. Motivation is secondary. Whether you do it smiling and inspired or whether you do it gritting your teeth and hating life, you still need to do it. Now, if you wait for motivation, you may never finish. Some subjects are great, some subjects are boring and will suck your will to live. You still need to do them. So fine, I hear you say, give me something useful other than lectures. So here are my tips for motivation beyond the tough love from the start. So first of all, motivation often follows momentum. So don't wait for motivation to get started. Do it the other way around. Get moving and you'll generally see that the motivation often comes in after that. Secondly, find a connection. Ask yourself, how would this topic improve my business? Or help my kids get a job? Or help my community? Whatever the topic is and whatever your passion is in life, find a way to connect them. So having context and purpose for the material can just help give you a push. Thirdly, translate the material into simple terms and teach other people. So share your reading, set up a coffee date with a friend or another student where you summarize the module. And the simpler you can make it, or the more you can translate it into different environments, then the more motivating it can be for you as well. Now, tip number 4, commit to a deadline. Find a mentor, a study group, or a friend and commit to a certain amount of output each week. Having people give up their time for you can help you to commit to them. And number 5, the good old reward yourself. A simple one, but give yourself a treat when you submit an assignment or complete a major waypoint. Doesn't need to be much. Anything from a guilt-free treat yourself to a movie night, or go out and buy new shoes. Next, just write 100 words a day, even 15 minutes of just sit down and do uninterrupted, unedited writing can really just help the creative juices start flowing and get the ball rolling. So it's the academic equivalent of just get dressed and walk into a gym if you're trying to get motivated for exercise. Now next, find a buddy, whether it's a study partner, which can be in person or online, or a friend who can just sit at the other end of the phone in silence while you write. Sometimes just having someone there for a set period of time can help give you that push you need. And finally, if you need a break, whether it's a few hours or whether it's a week, then give yourself permission. So rest and recuperation is just as important for motivation. So just remember though, if you do take some time off, set a deadline, set a time to come back. Otherwise that week off can become an entire year. And yes, I have seen that happen. So in conclusion, the goal is to keep motivation and momentum up and to get through the course, so set clear deadlines and work to establish a decent structure that works. And then learn the fundamentals, formatting, report structure, definitions, referencing. It often comes down to just learning the gap between how you interpret the assignment instructions and how your assessors interpret it. So create templates, choose a clear topic or a scholarly opinion, find a mentor or someone who's willing to read through your assignments, and don't overthink it. Most subjects are similar, so the whole process becomes a bit of a paint by numbers or a rinse and repeat approach. So feel free to share your own tips and advice for people studying online. We hope some of these tips will help, and best of luck with your studies. And remember, like and subscribe so you can be informed when we do post new content. Other than that, thanks very much for joining us and have a great day.